When secretly listening to other people's conversations, what was the most unsettling thing you heard? Homeless guy talking to himself, saying he's ready to blow himself up with everyone on the train. He had a lighter and a hot dog in his hands. 4 women having lunch at a table next to me in a cafe. One woman is dominating the conversation, talking about her fiancé and how she's not really that interested in him and that he's not very bright. Then she casually says that she is pregnant with some other guy's kid and is going to have an abortion. The others tried to smile and act like it was funny, but I could see the troubled expressions on their faces. I guess the most disturbing thing was how loudly she was talking and how unconcerned she was. Like this is totally normal for her and her friends. I hope someone tells her fiancé. Poor dude. There was a girl behind me talking casually with her friends about how she was in bed with a dude. And as they finished she remembered it was her boyfriend's birthday. Wow, that's fricked up. I lived in a house where my bedroom shared a wall with next door's bedroom. We had a nightmare family next door who were always yelling and screaming at each other. I eventually learned to tune them out. One day they were having a particularly blazing row when I heard the mum scream that is incest at the daughter. It turned out she was boning her stepbrother, but that they had grown up together since they were around 2. 13-year-old me was rather surprised. Years ago I had to go to the emergency room to get my foot stitched up. Whilst I was waiting for the nurse to come stitch me up, I overheard the woman in the bed next to me. Both our curtains were drawn, so we were essentially in our own little rooms. Explained to the nurse that she was HIV positive and had been for a while, but begged the nurse not to tell her husband. I never found out what happened, but it always stuck with me. I still can't believe she would keep that from him, and I always wondered whether the nurse would have to tell him or respect her request. About 7-8 years ago around Easter I was at church waiting in line for confession. This guy was right in front of me, and when he went in, he spoke just loud enough for me to hear him say he regretted beating his wife. I'm not sure why, but that really shook me. I heard god-awful screams. A little while later a girl ran up to my neighbor and say that the EMTs got her brother breathing again, about 9-year-old boy. Another little bit of time passes and I hear the neighbor say the boy died. He had an asthma attack and lived in a hoarder type house that was condemned. I assume he couldn't find his inhaler in all the mess. Unclean conditions may not cause asthma, but mold spores or even large amounts of can absolutely trigger it. If this is a kind of hoarder house where the healthy adults on the cleanup crew wear respirators, the parents should be tried for manslaughter or criminal negligence. Heard a dude graphically talk about finding his girlfriend hung herself. The other guy said, "Did you frick the body?" I didn't. A double take in my head and quickly left. Maybe they realized you were eavesdropping and were trying to frick with you. That's what I want to believe. I'm a perpetual eavesdropper. Can't turn it off. And I overheard my parents quietly discussing some blood tests I'd gotten in another room. But this is just the snippet I remember clearly. Dad, her phosphate's critically low. I'm not sure what we should do at this point. Mum, frazzled, weepy, we have to get her into the ICU. She could just die in her sleep. She could just die. Very unpleasant to hear. My phosphate, as it turns out, was hovering 0.4, which is extremely serious. But finding that out wasn't as bad as listening to my parents discuss the course of action. They're both doctors and never stressed about their kids' injuries or illnesses, cause they'd always seen dealt with worse, but this time my dad sounded genuinely concerned and my mum was crying, which he just doesn't do. That was last week and my phosphate's getting back on track thanks to medical intervention, but that was definitely the most pure dread I've ever felt. Hearing them talk about it. People talking crap about my mom, who died a few weeks earlier of cancer. Worse was that later said something to my face about it. I would have punched that C in the face. I was waiting to pick up a carry-out order and I heard one waitress say to another, "So, like, can you get herpes from kissing someone?" or, like, "Do you need to touch their blood? How does that work? I'm just curious. I didn't want my food anymore. I'll have the herpes and ham soup." A mom was talking about not being able to afford her daughter's school clothes, so she had to convince her daughter to take some stuff out of lost property, and in the same conversation talked about paying $700 for her lubs and she had just leased a $400 monthly car. Frick, I hate people like her. I overheard a wife-girlfriend threaten to shred all of a guy's Magic the Gathering cards. I didn't get a chance to hear the rest because I accidentally let out a gasp of horror as they were walking away arguing. One time I was at an IHOP with a buddy and at the table behind us was an older woman telling her granddaughter how to trap a man by getting pregnant. She was going in depth about how to store used condoms and how to inseminate herself, and I was just staring at my pancakes with shell shock. What the heck? The whole train wagon listened the following as the two drunkards spoke loud as F. A. You heard Alex stopped with his unofficial tattoo studio? B. Yeah, I heard he got AIDS and doesn't feel so good lately. A. He got what? B. AIDS. He was diagnosed a year ago. A. I wanted him to finish the tattoo he started a month ago and he said he just doesn't do it no more. Crap, I bet he got me infected with his freaking tattoo needle. Freaking junkies. I am constantly disturbed by listening to what parents say do to their children in public. A lot of people are not fit to be parents. My parents are in serious debt and had no problem going into detail about how troubling their situation was. I had so much anxiety growing up. I was a city bus driver for a few years. One overheard conversation I'll never forget is a dad talking into his cell phone to his wife GF, obviously punching mad, telling her how he's gonna beat their child when he gets home. Then he makes her put the kid on the phone and proceeds to tell the kid that he's going to freaking murder him and put him through a wall and break his freaking neck. Not blustery, angry dude noise, low and mean, and with intent. It was really upsetting. So I called it into the on-duty supervisor, ex-cop, and asked to have the local PD dispatched to my bus to talk to this butthole. The supervisor tells me not to worry about it. I say, no, I'm intending to keep worrying about it. So he sighs, butthole, and calls the PD, who refuse to come out because they can't respond to hearsay. My bus had 13 freaking cameras on board, recording audio and video the whole time. I quit not long after that. Frick that job. Okay, maybe this doesn't belong here because it was said directly to me instead of my overhearing it, but I'm heading home from late class and I'm downtown waiting for the bus. A middle-aged man walks into the small bus stop area. He has a phone pressed to his ear and tagging along with him is a little boy, maybe around 5 or 6. There were probably 2 more people around not paying attention. The man steps outside of the stop for a minute and begins talking on the phone frantically. The little boy takes this moment to come up to me and say, "My daddy doesn't love me. I don't know why. I don't know how to make him love me." He sounds very sad, yet very matter of fact. I am shocked for a moment, and I have absolutely nothing to say, save for trying to deny what he said. But what the heck do I know? While I'm stuttering out something along the lines of course he loves you, the guy on the phones calls out for the kid and they take off down the street. The guy is practically dragging the kid. That's how fast they took off. That was so sad to hear. Even more sad was that the kid didn't seem to be exaggerating and seemed to be resigned to the fact that his dad didn't love him, but felt the need to tell a complete stranger. My heart just broke reading this. Poor boy. I wouldn't know what to say to that either if I were in your shoes. Maybe it was just a bad stressful day for the dad, or lil guy's parents were going through a divorce. Either way, I hope it gets better for the poor kid. So this happened about 5 years ago. I was at a shady old bar with a few friends and there were 2 men in their 50s sitting in front of the slot machine. We could listen to their conversation very clearly since our table was about 3 meters away from them. They kept talking about want to keep him starving for a bit longer and we'll need to get him a newspaper. This was so scary to us. Maybe he was keeping a person locked up, but probably not. One of the creepiest things 17-year-old me heard. Dogfights. A guy in my high school Spanish class talking about raping a girl over the weekend. He didn't call it rape, but he said she was crying and telling him to stop and that it hurt, but he kept going because she just had to get used to it. His friend agreed with him. Christ, that's terrible. Not unsettling after I looked into it, but caught me off guard at first. At a coffee shop, I overhear what I gathered to be 2 professors at my school's theology school. Their conversation caught my attention when I heard them talk about one of their students favorably, saying she's working very hard on getting her STD. I looked up a possible alternative acronym. Turns out they're referring to a doctorate in sacred theology, which can be referred to as an STD. You listen to me, sir. I have 3 STD and I'll be damned if I don't use them. I was inside a church in Barcelona and I overheard a pray. The guy is asking, if I kill someone, the voice is the chance is going to stop get better? He was muttering in Spanish that can be trick for Portuguese speakers. I saw this guy all the time and he look always in extreme distress. That's schizophrenia. Lived in a crappy apartment for a couple of years. Walls were so thin I could routinely hear others' conversations. Next door neighbor liked to tell her 8-year-old son that he was a loser and would never amount to anything. It was heartbreaking. But the worst incident was my downstairs neighbor. Let's call him Steve. Steve was rather unstable and the cops knew him from their frequent visits. One night around 2 AM he started blasting loud music. Apparently several people called the cops because an officer showed up before I even had a chance to call them myself. I hear the police banging on Steve's door, yelling, "This is the police. Open the door, Steve." Then the cop went around to the side and banged on the window, yelling, "Steve, turn off the music and answer the door." The music abruptly stops and I hear the cop go back to the front door and knock it loudly with his fists again. More yelling for Steve to open the door. Then I guess Steve did open the door because next the cop yelled, "Steve, put down the hammer," and then I only heard some grunts and horrible moaning. By this time I was on the phone with 911, freaking out and telling them that I think a policeman has been killed by my downstairs neighbor. I never found out if the policeman lived or died. I was too terrified to leave my apartment that night because I didn't know where Steve went and or if he heard me freaking out on the phone to the cops. I could see through my window that a number of police cars and ambulances showed up, but I never left my apartment to investigate and they never came to me for a statement or anything. That incident was about 20 years ago and I still remember it so vividly. I can hear the cop's voice and those weird gurgling grunt sounds like it was yesterday. My friend had a downstairs neighbor whose boyfriend cheated on her constantly, and their closets formed a perfect chimney for the sound to come up. So anytime she was crying in her bedroom, we could hear her. The worst was when he cheated on her with her best friend on her birthday in her own bed. We didn't hear that, but we heard the aftermath. In this case we were the ones having the unsettling conversation. So I'm grocery shopping with my 4-year-old and we're in the meat section. I'm looking for a good pack of ground beef when this lady walks up and starts looking for meat too. Well, my daughter points to a pack of ground beef and asks, "Mommy, what's that stuff?" Now I know she knows what ground beef is, so I answered, "Well, these are brains, honey." And she said, "Are those human brains?" in her childish awestruck voice. I said, "Well, yeah, when you die they cut you up and different parts of your body turn into different meats." I pointed to the steaks and told her those were feet and the ground beef was our brains. Well, I finally grabbed some meat and when I look up, the lady next to us has the most horrified sick look on her face. I turn the cart around and as we pass by the roasts my daughter says, "Hey look mom, butt cheeks. AWW, that's cute." Used to work in a call center, sat next to a schizophrenic bipolar colleague. She used to sit there talking to herself about pulling the wings off butterflies and making them suffer for her. She also said if XXXXX female colleague came near her boyfriend again she would slit her throat. She didn't have a boyfriend, reported it to management. They said she's special needs, there's not much we can do. I was sitting next to these two ladies at a bar. One was talking about how her son died in a car accident. She was crying pretty hard and the other lady goes, "It's been over a year already," in an annoyed voice. What a bee. Sat next to 4 girls wannabe types in a Williamsburg restaurant while having dinner with my wife. In quick succession. A. My daddy, I assume the confectionery type, wants to take me to the Hamptons this week. Need another girl for a threesome. B. Another girl, your pee tastes good, you wanna come? B. He treats you good, right? I am down for it. I got to pay some bills. My parents need some money to pay rent. A. His CM tastes alright. Nothing kinky. C. Yo, I have to pay my loans. Does your daddy want a foursome? Laughter. A. I'll ask. Usually for a big party he brings in his stepson. He is cute and such a baby. He is like a junior at NYU. That ending got me shouting, what the frick. 2 guys talking about whether they had enough gasoline to get the job done. They could have been talking about burning brush. or a Derby rally, or they could have been talking about burning down the warehouse that burned down that week. Well, frick. Walking with some friends through Seattle, I heard a group of women discussing the best way to get one of their fathers to bed another one of the girls. These girls were all in their early 20s, at the youngest. I was in my yard recently and overheard my neighbors in their yard. It's a 60-year-old woman and her 40-year-old son. I heard them talking about how they needed to wash their dolls and dye their hair again because they got them too dirty in bed last night. They also share a bed from what I heard. This is when you know you should move. Yuck. A 7-8-year-old kid telling his mom that he didn't want to hurt people but the voice in his head told him to. Crap kid, I am only here for diapers. Now you creeped me the frick out. I hope he got meds or therapy or something positive. I've once heard a woman say she will lose her children in a custody battle because of a seemingly unethical judge in family court. Hearing my unemployed neighbor tell his wife that he'll have to go there, KFC, with her because she can't do anything right and she forgot his chocolate cake. He was verbally abusive. It was messed up being privy to that. I wonder why she didn't leave. The same reason my ex-friend's mom doesn't leave her fiancé when he's calling her 17-year-old daughter a W. You ain't got no money or education to leave. I work in a law firm that focuses on domestic cases. I overheard a client talking about how her kids found vibrating sticks in their dad's bedroom. I was at the mall when I overheard this wonderful exchange. Do Deborah A, she's pretty hot, man. Do Deborah B, but she's pretty young. Do Deborah A, I mean in 6 more years she'll be 18. Do Deborah B, yeah, and you'll be 35. I don't know if it was some sort of joke or not, but it made me super uncomfortable. I let out an audible what the frick before they glanced over at me with a panicked expression and walked away quickly. Dude B's had some experience to steering the convo away from Dude A's freaky pedo crap. I was in a nightclub one time and the music was over so everyone was leaving at the same time. As we slowly made our way out, I heard 2 girls talking behind me. Girl 1 says, I love this place. You can do something like this. The girl grabs my butt, and no one cares and girl 2 just says yeah it's great crack, fun, isn't it? I pretended not to notice due to drunkenness but I was actually fairly sober. It didn't bother me really, it just unsettled me a little bit because as a guy you don't expect that crap to happen. 2 very respectable looking older gentlemen sitting in a pub discussing how ugly women probably want to get raped. Sick fricks. I had to fight the impulse to downvote. Then I realized you were just telling the story. I almost shot the messenger. Age 11. Heard dad insisting he better at least get a blowjob when talking to mom down the hallway, where sound carried unfortunately surprisingly well. The kid next door was told very loudly by his mom that he was an accident she never wanted and she regretted not having an abortion every day. All the kids playing outside heard that one. It was also said on more than one occasion. He did grow up to have quite a good career in finance if I recall correctly. My parents' neighbors speak super loud. Once I was in my sister's bedroom, the neighbor's living room is on the other side of her room, when we hear the mother say, since I started my menopause my vaginal discharge is green, with too high emphasis. We're still traumatized about it. I work at a coffee shop and 2 adults regulars were talking about 16-year-old girls. I never looked at them the same. My wife is from Algeria. One day, we were in an Algerian university while we were visiting her family and friends. Standing back against a wall looking out over a balcony, there's 2 kids around the corner from us who have no idea we're there but are talking about how they raped a girl they were friends with and now she's pregnant. They didn't know which was the father or anything but knew their lives would be ruined and spent in prison if anyone found out. So they're talking about how to get this girl an abortion so nobody finds out she's pregnant. In Algeria, if a girl gets pregnant before marriage she either has to marry the man she slept with or her family and marital life is over basically. So the girl they raped was more than likely scared to tell her family what happened for fear they'd disown her for premarital sex. In the case of rape victims, there are shelters and stuff set up to help them but the help is rarely enough for the women alone, let alone a baby. They finally came to the conclusion that they should basically kidnap her and beat her stomach so badly she has a miscarriage and then abandon her outside the city on a beach to be found by police. No idea if they ever did it, but my wife and her friends looked totally mortified as they were listening to these monsters talk about this and translating it all to me. When I was a kid I had an old black and white knob TV in my bedroom. If you turned the UHF dial as far as it would go to channel 81, the frequency would bleed over into the same range as cordless phones. My friends and I would spend countless sleepovers listening to all of the people who lived in the townhomes around us and all of their day-to-day bulls. The problem was it was a crapshoot. You move the antenna around and pick up different signals, but they would go in and out. Occasionally we would hit AM radio stations from 5 states away. Sometimes only a faint hint of a conversation, but sometimes it was loud and clear and it was like you were right there in the phone with them. This was one of those calls. I heard a male voice that none of us recognized, speaking to whom we assumed was a 1-900 sex line, trying to convince the woman on the other end to act like a 5-year-old. She refused at first, but after some prodding he convinced her. She threw on this baby voice, and he went off. He pretended to be her daddy and wanted to make her feel good. Let's just say crap got disgusting really fast, and the phone sex worker went right along with it. So after some heavy breathing and audible climax, he thanked her and asked her name so he could ask for her again next time. Her name was Candy. Of course it was. My 2 friends and I immediately went into Hardy Boys mode and over the next few weeks of summer, tried to figure out who the creepy guy was. We looked first at any single dudes in the neighborhood, but there wasn't many. Then one of us had the creepy realization that it was probably someone with kids. So we would eyeball anyone within a few houses of mine, figuring the signal wouldn't have been very strong. We never 100% solved the case, but we had our main suspect. It was the weird family who lives next door to me. They were this perfect little family with a Stepford wife, mother and a maybe 6-year-old son. The dad was the sweater vest wearing super religious guy. Something always struck me as odd about that family. After a few weeks we moved on to another adventure, but that call always stuck with me. During my exams when I was 16 I overheard my dad talking to one of my family members on the phone about my mum's cancer. That's how I found out, and because I wasn't being told I overthought everything. It took my mind out of it and I luckily got okay grades. She's fine now and said that the reason that they didn't tell me was because of my exams, but my dad's inability to keep a secret ruined that. My mom to my pregnant cousin. Well, you know, if you're on top then it'll be a boy. That's how it happened with schoolboy Gio. My cousin's response was, heck then all of our kids will be boys because I'm always on top. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.